Hello everybody, welcome. This is going to be a really fun presentation today. My name is Brandon with Brand Astrology, and I was invited to be doing this presentation here on mutual reception in astrology. So you can see we're doing dynamic duos, mutual reception in astrology. And I also have put down there my email as well, if any of you are interested in learning more about your specific birth chart and what specifically this is going to look like for you. Mutual reception is a very, very fun concept. It kind of lightens up a lot of astrology terms in a lot of ways, and it is something that I myself have a really deep passion for, and I have a really deep kind of hyperfixation on mutual reception in general, especially after I learned that I have a mutual reception within my own chart very early on in my astrological studies. And I am really excited to be able to do this presentation here today. There's going to be a lot of different concepts that we're going to be going through. Obviously, mutual reception is the biggest one of them, but I'm going to be kind of breaking down a bunch of different combinations that it can be and how those things can happen. So stay tuned. We're going to be going through quite a lot of content here with this presentation, and I'm just excited to be talking about one of these very fun concepts that not many people tend to kind of really focus in on, which is mutual reception. So with that being started, let's just kind of get a little bit more into who I am so you guys know who I am on the screen here and where I come from, what I'm doing, okay? So my name is Brandon with Brand Astrology. I have been studying astrology for over 14 years, since about 2010. And after a couple years of self-study, I began really practicing privately and helping my friends and family privately, probably since about 2013, 2014 or so. And I was just kind of always practicing those things. I was always within this space. I had a lot of different spiritual mentors throughout my journey. And then what ended up happening is I ended up getting a Reiki certification as well as a Lilac certification, which are both versions of energy healing. Reiki is obviously way more known than Lilac. Lilac is more kind of focused within the Chicagoland area. I know there's people that do Lilac all over the world, but it did originate from one of my mentors here in the Chicagoland area, which is obviously where I am at. And then the type of astrology that I specifically focus on is evolutionary astrology. So I focus more so on Pluto, Uranus, and the nodes of the moon. I find that those really tend to kind of key in a lot more with a lot more depth and a lot more kind of storytelling that's being able to be had with that, and a lot more kind of like trauma and a lot more of a big insight, honestly, in a lot of ways of evolutionary astrology. But there's a lot of different evolutionary astrological texts out there. You guys are more than welcome to look those things up because there's a lot of different branches in astrology. And then obviously with evolutionary astrology and just in astrology in general, I really firmly believe to have a strong emphasis on mental health, as we are people that are consulting with people and looking at these charts and helping people understand a better idea of what we see within those charts and what we really have a lot of tools and a lot of power in those specific moments to impact our clients. And so having an emphasis on mental health, and I'm currently going to school to pursue mental health counseling, it's something that will allow me to be able to add more value to what I'm doing with my own astrology here. And so that's just a little bit about me. I did also put my chart on here as well if anyone's interested in that. So I know some of you, this is brand new to you. You guys don't know much about astrology, so this might be a little bit more of an intermediate concept. But essentially my chart is on the screen there. So I'm a Scorpio Sun, Aquarius Moon, and Capricorn Rising. And I have quite a lot of Scorpio stuff going on. And the reason why my mutual reception on my chart, which is kind of getting a little bit ahead of the game, but I have my Mercury in Sagittarius and my Jupiter in Virgo. And so that is Jupiter in Mercury's sign and Mercury in Jupiter's sign. So that is what is mutual reception, which is one of the biggest parts of my own chart that I have kind of always tripped up on until I really understood the concept of mutual reception and really leaned into it and really understood the gift that it is. But yeah, for the most part, that is my chart right there. If any of you are interested in looking at that, you're welcome to. Now, what is mutual reception? Let's get into the meat and bones of it. Let's really dig into this right now. So, mutual reception is a astrological concept that's a little bit more on the intermediate side, like I had said. So to understand mutual reception, you really need to know what planets rule what, okay? And because mutual reception is when planets share one another's sign or their rulership, and therefore can create kind of a unique undercurrent within the natal chart. So in my previous example with my Mercury in a Jupiterian sign and then my Jupiter in a Mercurial sign, that is a concept of mutual reception within my own chart. So those two energies are working within one another, and we'll talk about that as we progress through this. So an easier example to kind of understand would be someone who has their sun in the sign of Cancer and then their moon in the sign of Leo, where the sun rules Leo and the moon rules Cancer. So when these two planets are in each other's signs, they are said to be receiving one another and in mutual reception of one another in that example. And so they are definitely assisting one another throughout a lot of different things. And that is why if you have things in mutual reception, it allows you to look at your chart very differently in a lot of ways that most people tend to not look at the chart. They tend to look at it, especially in the beginning, as very much, oh, I have, my sun in Cancer, but doesn't look at the moon also being in Leo and sees how that may help, right? Or for me, for example, with my Mercury in Sagittarius, I would always feel very kind of beaten down when I would look up those explanations of Mercury in Sagittarius, because it was something that wasn't really where Mercury liked to be, right? And so it was something that I never really understood that could be mitigated and that could be helped until I learned about the concept of mutual reception and realized that it allows those two planets that are in mutual reception to create some sort of a lending effect where they're kind of lending to one another, as they can kind of lean towards one another to kind of help within those specific goals of those planets. So when it comes to me and my Mercury Jupiter, I have always kind of talked about it in a lot of ways, because they lend to one another, where it kind of forces that those planetary energies to kind of really sit in those specific lessons of those planetary energies, because they're really kind of bouncing back and forth from one another quite consistently. And we'll kind of see as we go through some of these examples throughout the course of this webinar here today, what specifically it means in specific combinations, and how those combinations can kind of play out in a lot of different ways. So that's just kind of a general overview of what mutual reception is, so you know what that is. There are some other versions of reception, but for the case of brevity for this, because I don't want this to be a super long webinar. It's already probably going to be. It is something that I want to ensure that everybody can kind of get something out of. So I will be kind of going through little tidbits of information, because mutual reception is such a large concept, and it's something that has a lot of kind of context within it. And so I'm trying to get through the meatiest of the content, but there is a lot more to the concept of just reception in general. Mutual reception is its own specific type of reception, and there's other parts of reception as well that we're not going to really be talking about today, just for the sake of kind of brevity. Now, a couple of things I wanted to say about notes on the mutual reception rulership, because many of you probably already know the rulership scheme, right? Where, we have the sun rules Leo, the moon rules Cancer, Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, Venus rules Taurus and Libra, Mars rules Aries, and in traditional rules Scorpio, but in modern is ruled by Pluto. And then we have, Jupiter ruling Sagittarius, and then traditionally Pisces, but modern is Neptune for Pisces. And then for Saturn, we have Saturn ruling both Capricorn and Aquarius in the traditional scheme, and not necessarily Uranus ruling Aquarius. Now, something about this that I am going to bring up as we kind of get to these specific combinations with specifically Pisces and Aquarius and Scorpio when we get to those ones. I will bring up, and even Saturn, I will bring up some examples that I know of that have some relevancy for the other side of things, meaning the modern rulership of Scorpio being ruled by Pluto, Neptune, or Pisces being ruled by Neptune, and Aquarius being ruled by Uranus, because there is definitely some very big connections to that, but just for the sake of brevity and just so it's as easy to understand and digestible, we are going to keep it with the modern rulerships, with the traditional rulerships, to ensure that we kind of really start at that base level. That's really where I think a lot of us are going to be, because if we start throwing in the outer planets, and the outer planets being Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, we're going to see, and even the nodes, we're going to see a lot more of kind of complications and a lot more information for all of you guys to kind of digest. So I'm trying to make this information as digestible as possible, and to do that, I'm going to be using the traditional rulerships. So as you can see, that means that Scorpio, as opposed to being ruled by Pluto, will be ruled by Mars within the mutual reception. Pisces, as opposed to being ruled by Neptune, will be ruled by Jupiter. And then Aquarius, as opposed to being ruled by Uranus, will be ruled by Saturn. Okay, and like I said, there are going to be some examples I'm going to give throughout the course of this, because I have seen a few within my own studies that I feel like are relevant, but I'll get to those when I get to those. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, I will be using traditional rulers for the zodiac signs. Like I said, as it would be way too long and complex to go into all the different combinations. So Mars rules Scorpio, Jupiter rules Pisces, and Saturn rules Aquarius. So that being said, let's move on to what are the key themes in mutual reception before we kind of get a little bit more into all these examples, okay? So mutual reception key themes, a couple things that I found are really, really, really important. And as you can see on the screen, we have the concept of mitigation, okay? So mitigation simply means that something is being kind of like at ease, or it allows it to kind of relax a little bit. It softens what could be a difficult placement. And so mitigation allows the likely difficult expressions of those planets to feel more comfortable as they are helping one another. And so when planets are in mutual reception, especially if they're in mutual reception and also in aspect, which we'll get into that once we start getting through these, you'll see that there's a lot of easy mitigation, because there's a lot of smooth conversations with those planets, okay? Now, another thing about this that I think a lot of people kind of can get confused with is they really don't understand how mutual reception can be necessarily positive. And that's one of the biggest things that I tend to bring up in my readings with clients when I see mutual receptions is about reframing the way that we look at our charts, because typically a lot of the time, if not most times, mutual reception, you're going to have a planet in a sign it doesn't like to be in. That's pretty common. And so when you have two planets in the signs that they don't like to be in, but those two planets are helping one another, it allows you to see your chart in a way that allows you to feel empowered, allows you to really look at your chart in a more 3D kind of like spinning it on its head, and kind of allowing you to see more of what the potentialities of your chart are when we start looking at other sorts of mitigations and mutual receptions. And so with reframing, it allows most placements in the mutual reception to be seen in a brighter light, right? Or a different perspective. And it may open some of your approaches to those planets, right? Because when we have this natal chart that we're kind of stuck in to some sort of degree, we're not really stuck in it. It's something that we are meant to evolve into. And as we learn about mutual reception, for those of us that have it, we'll see that there's going to be a lot more positives in this what can seem like very dull situation, in a way a lot of people speak on many of these placements, right? Like when I had said about my Mercury Jupiter, when I looked at my Mercury in Sagittarius, it was something that so many people just were like, oh, it's a detrimented placement, it's not going to be happy, it's not going to be successful, you're not going to be able to speak on things. And I had a speech impediment when I was younger, and I, now do public speaking for a living. So it's a very interesting way that my mutual reception showed up, which I'll kind of talk about that when we get to Mercury-Jupiter mutual receptions. But at the end of the day, it's something that allowed me to see my chart differently, and in turn, turn it into a more positive perspective and a more positive approach in that regard. Now, 2 more notes about mutual reception that I found are pretty prominent. It not only connects the planets deeper, but it also connects the houses on a deeper level too. So it will also connect the house themes as the planets are consistently looking towards one another for support. So it brings in the themes of those house placements as well. So for example, for me, my Mercury is in my 12th, my Jupiter's in my 9th. And so when we see that, we're gonna see the Mercury going to the 9th, the 12th going to the 9th, and the 9th going to the 12th, because we're also gonna see Mercury and Jupiter in mutual reception. And so not only are the Mercury-Jupiter themes going to kind of be playing out really, really strong in my example, or whatever planets are in mutual reception are going to be really, really kind of keying into one another and kind of bouncing back and forth from one another pretty much all the time. But at the same time, those houses that those planets are placed in are also going to be interlocked, right? So the 9th and the 12th are really interwoven for me as well, where I am working to teach not just astrology, which is 9th house, but also law and mental health, and kind of leaning into all of those different areas, and counseling and kind of changing the legal system and changing the way that we look at laws around mental health specific individuals. And so that's something that's interesting in my chart, is the connection between the 9th and the 12th then leans into these kind of higher teachings, higher knowledge around mental health, and around people that are unseen and people that are not spoken about. So it also connects those house placements as well. So we'll get into that a little bit more too. Now, and then finally, mutual reception, it also accentuates the lessons. So, and this is something I've been talking about a lot in my my YouTube series that I have been doing, which has been really, really fun, which has been all the different planets and all the different houses and signs. So I'm currently working on the Cancer season series, so all of the Cancer and 4th house videos. And I've found, both in my own studies, but being able to really go through and really sit with these specific energies, that when we have not only planets in domicile, right? That when we have planets in domicile, so I'm saying Venus in Libra, Venus in Taurus, Mars in Aries, Mars in Scorpio, Saturn in Capricorn, Jupiter in Pisces, Sun in Leo, it accentuates that lesson around that planet, because that planet is at home in that regard. And so when we flip that concept on its head of domicile, right, which nothing in mutual reception is going to be in domicile. That's the concept. That's the premise of it. Nothing is in its own dignity. And so what ends up happening, at least by domicile, meaning like traditional rulership, what ends up happening is it accentuates the lessons related to those planetary themes. So because the connecting planets already have a larger theme in the native's life, it therefore increases the lesson of those planets in that in the mutual reception. And so not only do we see with mutual reception a larger focus on those lessons, it almost enlarges those lessons even further, because it really wants to shine a strong light on whatever is within mutual reception of one another, to a way that is really bringing out this really key lesson within the natal chart of whatever is in mutual reception. So for example, my Mercury-Jupiter is something that has been a huge part of my entire life, and it's something that is always been a never-ending kind of process of learning how to work with both my creative and logical mind, and kind of have that Mercury-Jupiter back and forth on my philosophical faith, like faith-based, meaning-based sort of way of learning and teaching, right? That kind of like Mercury-Jupiter conversation has always been very, very large and always will be as I learn to work with that very large mutual reception over and over and over again as I come into term with my own natal chart. So that's just kind of the key themes of mutual reception and what we're going to kind of go through today. And I hope this kind of gives you a good concept of what we're working on and how to look at your chart in specific in a very much deeper and more empowered way. That's really my goal with this, is to really empower a lot of people to look at their own natal chart in a way that is so much more than just a singular placement, because it is all a giant kind of machine, I guess, if you will, that is working within itself to kind of fulfill those lessons. And when we have something in mutual reception, it really accentuates that specific kind of programming or sequence or kind of like cog within the wheel to constantly be reassessed or constantly be revamped or really worked through and really fine-tuned in a way that is very different than if it was just a domicile placement or a non-mutual reception. So with that, we're going to get started. We're going to start off with the sun, because we always start with the sun. So we're going to start with mutual reception with the sun. Okay. So a couple things about having a mutual reception with the sun. There's some key themes that I tend to see. And a lot of these key themes you're going to see that are kind of just related to the theme of the planet. But as we go through each of these specific mutual receptions, you're going to see that there's going to be this kind of overarching theme of them that is very specific to each mutual reception, because there's a lot of them, which is once again why I didn't go into adding all of the outer planets for that, because that would make this presentation extremely long. It's already going to be quite long. So the mutual reception with the sun. So a couple things about this right off the bat. A big focus upon building the self-concept, okay? So when we see mutual reception with a sun placement, we will always see that a placement in Leo, obviously, because that's the only planet that is in domicile with the sun. And so all these planets are going to be in Leo. And what is Leo? Okay, Leo is this idea of our own self-identity, our own self-concept, our own ability to show off who we are. Right, and so when we have a solar mutual reception, a lot of our identity is something that is going to be a very strong focus for us. Right, learning how specifically to curate our identity or build our identity, or show off our identity and our self-concept, our way of looking at ourselves. So people that have a solar mutual reception, you can see this as commonly people that will have more of a identity kind of story being told. And typically when you see a mutual reception, you're going to also see kind of other parts of the chart. They're going to kind of double up on that specific key theme. And so with mutual reception with the sun, we're going to see a key theme around self-concept, self-identity, building that, expressing that, being okay to express that. Learning how to be a leader, right? The sun is the leader in a lot of ways. It is our guiding light. It is what we utilize to bring us life in our reality, right? And it's about taking up space with the sun, because all these placements, once again, are going to have a Leo placement within them that are going to be brought out. And so with this, we also have a big concept around inner child healing and creativity, right? So those are another thing about the sun, is being able to shine yourself in all facets of yourself with that inner child healing and the creativity that comes with that, with just having joy and showing who you are and loving who you are, and being able to share that with the world, okay? Now, so a couple things. I have just really quick examples of mutual reception with the sun. So as you see here on the screen, we have the sun in Aries or the sun in Scorpio with a Mars in Leo, sun in Taurus or in Libra with Venus in Leo, Sun in Gemini or Virgo with Mercury in Leo, Sun in Cancer, Moon in Leo, like I had said before, Sun in Sagittarius or Pisces with Jupiter in Leo, and Sun in Capricorn or Aquarius with Saturn in Leo. Okay, now I'm not going to go through every single one of these because that would take me quite a while. Now, once we get to a little bit later in the presentation, you will see a lot of these will repeat themselves, obviously, because as we kind of get further down, so for example, this is mutual reception with the Sun, but if we look at the Sun in Sagittarius, it's also in Jupiter mutual reception because it's a Sun-Jupiter mutual reception, right? So once we get to the Jupiter portion of this presentation, you'll see the Jupiter in Leo, Sun in Sagittarius or Pisces that will repeat itself once again for that same sort of conversation there, okay? So just know that some of these combinations will repeat themselves as we go through the specific presentation here. But so, like I said earlier, with the Sun mutual reception, all these planets are going to be in Leo. Every single thing that receives from the Sun is always going to be in Leo. Now, something I want to bring up about this is a little bit different, is that there's a concept of mutual reception. I know I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but about aspects, okay? So when planets are in aspect to one another, they are going to kind of see each other organically, right? No matter what, it's mutual reception or not, right? If planets in an aspect to one another, when there's an opposition, when the Sun and Moon are in opposition, right? That is a full moon. When any planet's in opposition, it is seeing one, and it's seeing itself. It's opposite of the other planet. It is kind of pressuring the other planet from the other side. Same with a square, trine, sextile, all those kind of traditional aspects. They're all going to kind of have their own conversation. Now, some of these combinations here with mutual reception with the Sun are going to have a natural aspect to them based off of just like the natural zodiac. Others will not. And that's why some other combinations here are going to have a little bit more difficulty in seeing and kind of naturally mitigating or softening that identity and kind of understanding that, right? So for example, if we have the Sun in Aries, Mars in Leo, that's a very strong combination because the Sun is exalted in Aries and Mars in Leo, and that's a really good mutual reception. One of the best ones, I would say, for the Sun in specific because of that exaltation of the Sun being in Aries. And you'll see that as we go through a couple of these here, that you'll see ones that are just naturally by dignity and other things a little bit more naturally powerful, if you will, and kind of lean into that. Doesn't mean that there's not power in mutual reception. There's power in every single mutual reception. It's just easier when those aspects are more prominent, more strong, or more easy to connect, right? Easy to see one another. And so with the Sun in Aries, Mars in Leo, and even Sun in Scorpio, Mars in Leo, so we have a Sun-Mars mutual reception. This is going to be, both of these combinations they both see Mars very well. So Sun in Aries is a natural trine to Mars and Leo, and then the Sun in Scorpio is a square to Mars and Leo, so there is a little bit more difficulty there. But at the end of it all, we are going to see that there's going to be a strong willpower of showing their identity with this. A strong, like, I want to show who I am, I want to be there. And when we see the Sun in Aries, the Sun in Aries is much more running the show in this mutual reception. So think of this as kind of the older sibling is trading their room with their younger sibling. The Sun in Aries in this example will be the older sibling, the one that has a little bit more authority in what is being done and kind of how that room, they want that room to be. And the younger sibling tends to know that and tends to understand that in that regard. And so we see that a lot with mutual reception, that there's a planet that's a little bit better than the other one by other dignities, right? By exaltation and things like that. And as we go through this presentation, I want you to know that every single mutual reception is unique in and of itself. I'm going to try and go through as many as I can within this presentation because there's a lot. And that's only with me doing the 7 traditional planets. I'm not even touching a lot of the other ones, but there is a lot that we can speak on with this. Now, If we go to Sun in Taurus and Libra with Venus and Leo, these both have a natural aspect to each other anyway, much like the Sun in Aries and Scorpio, where the Sun in Taurus and Venus and Leo, there is going to be a natural square between those, and Libra and Leo have a natural sextile. So this is, once again, a lot more positive. Now, the Sun in Libra, Venus and Leo would actually probably place Venus a little bit stronger in this position because the Sun does not do that well in Libra. Sun in Taurus, Venus and Leo is going to have a natural square to it. But at the end of the day, it's going to assist in the values and bringing those values into the identity, bringing that relational intelligence into what it wants to share with the world, right? And the other thing is, too, that you can kind of look at this, and I didn't say this yet, but I'll probably say this multiple times throughout the presentation, but you can look at this as having the, in the second example, you can look at this as having the Sun in Leo and Venus in Taurus or Venus in Libra, depending upon how much money you have. You can kind of reframe it like that, right? That's not exactly how it's going to be, but you can see how those energies are kind of, they're really capable of seeing each other in that way, and they're kind of able to lend to one another really well. Now the next one, Sun in Gemini and Virgo and Mercury and Leo. This is where we get a little bit more, we have the Sun in Gemini and Mercury and Leo. They naturally have a natural sextile as well, but Sun in Virgo and Mercury and Leo do not. Now, can the Sun be in Gemini and Mercury be in Leo? Yes. Is it possible? Is it likely? It can happen. It does happen sometimes with the Sun in Gemini, Mercury and Leo, but the Sun in Virgo, Mercury and Leo is much more likely because of that, one sign kind of a way. But Sun in Gemini, Mercury and Leo is it's almost not possible at all, just simply because of the distance. Now, what I want to bring up with this might be complicating it too much. Of course, when we get to Gemini and Virgo, this is when it starts getting complicated. But mutual reception can also work in regards to synastry. So if you are a Sun in Gemini, a Sun in Virgo, someone has Mercury and Leo, it can help you. It can help you find your identity, find your way to see yourself, say yourself, find the right words for who you are, right? That's part of that. So just know that that's part of it too, with that that Sun sign there. It's not possible to have the Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Leo, but it is possible to have it within a synastry. So look at that, make sure you understand that as well. But the Sun in Virgo, Mercury in Leo is definitely a possibility. I've seen that quite often, and there's a little interesting identity conversations happening a lot around those things. Now, Sun in Cancer, Moon in Leo, this is the easiest one to understand. This is where their inner world and their outer world is a lot more of an easier kind of go between how they're feeling and how they bring that out into the world. It's a lot of just natural, organic light sharing, and I think this is where a lot of people see the natural kind of mutual reception between those two, right? Where the Sun wants to be in Leo and the Moon wants to be in Cancer, but they're in each other's signs and they're able to kind of help one another see how they want to be feeling, how they want to be seen, how they want to show off, right? And so the Moon in Leo has this very bright kind of internal world, and the Sun in Cancer has a little bit more of a subtle external world, but they're really able to blend to one another in a lot of ways. Now, Sun in Sagittarius and or Pisces and Jupiter in Leo. This is, once again, when we see Sun in Sag, Jupiter and Leo, there's a natural trine here, so this definitely helps the situation quite a lot. When we see a Sun-Jupiter mutual reception, this is where you see a lot of, teachers and preachers and philosophers. I mean, Jupiter mutual reception, right? I have one, but not this one. The Sun-Jupiter definitely has a quite interesting father figure with that mutual reception, a quite interesting leadership and faith-based identity or religious identity that kind of has to come into question, and how they teach that to children and how that was conditioned to them within their childhood and how they bring it into their teachings now. And then finally, that Sun in Capricorn and Aquarius and Saturn in Leo. This is one that's a little bit more on the building of self-identity and self-concept that I spoke on earlier, and really kind of hammering away at that and really knowing how to shine one's light. And so it does create for quite a lot of slow build of the identity and kind of knowing how to shine and how to shine responsibly. But it does have a very strong identity over time through maturity, which we'll get to that when we get to the Saturn mutual receptions. So now let's move on to mutual reception with the moon. So mutual reception with the moon is different than the sun, obviously. This is going to have everything in Cancer as opposed to everything in Leo. And so here we're going to see a focus upon emotional care and safety, right, with the moon being involved, ancestry and family karma. And then we're going to see the reconditioning of the processing of one's emotions with the mutual reception with the moon as well. So understand that that's a lot of what mutual reception with the moon brings up is key themes around all of those concepts of the moon. They become a lot louder, and the desire to have emotional safety and the needs of one's emotions become really, really prominent and really important to the reconditioning process in this example, and understanding that most private part of you and your family heritage and your ancestry and all of those karmic ties, understanding how to clear those by sitting with your feelings and not allowing those emotional kind of processes that came from your family to repeat themselves is a really big thing that I see with mutual reception with the moon. So let's move into some examples here. So with the moon, we have a couple examples here. We have Moon in Aries or Scorpio with Mars in Cancer, Moon in Taurus, Libra with Venus in Cancer, Moon in Gemini or Virgo with Mercury in Cancer, Moon in Leo, Sun in Cancer. We already went over that example, obviously. Moon in Sag, Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer, Moon in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Saturn in Cancer. Now, so with the Moon in Aries or Scorpio with Mars in Cancer. So what's interesting, when it comes to some of these planets in Cancer, Mars in Cancer doesn't really do that well. And so when we see a Moon-Mars mutual reception, which I know someone personally who has this combination, we're going to see someone who has a very instinctual emotional response, someone who may be really desiring that emotional safety and almost has to fight for that emotional safety, and has a lot of, especially because when the moon's in Scorpio versus Moon in Aries and Mars in Cancer, when the moon's in Scorpio and Mars is in Cancer, they're both in water signs. And so they are both really trying to feel through that really deep, rich emotional karma that came with the family, and really is trying to transmute and transform their emotional responses in that regard. Kind of in the same way with the moon in Aries, Mars in Cancer, but this is more on the emotional impulse, learning how to follow that emotional impulse or not follow that emotional impulse. That's kind of what you'll see a lot with the Moon-Mars mutual reception, is just that emotional impulsivity, and knowing where that motivation comes from and how to utilize that, and how to fight for your own safety and fight for protection of your own feelings and what you consider to be emotionally important and what you consider to have that rootedness that you need to kind of build. Now we see Moon in Taurus or Libra with Venus in Cancer. This is a lot softer. This is where we're going to see this kind of a value shift, right? This is where it's not really so much of a fighting like it was with the Moon and Moon-Mars mutual reception, but the Moon-Venus mutual reception is really nice because the moon exalts in Venus's sign, and so Venus in Cancer with a Moon in Taurus is probably one of the better mutual receptions, if not one of the best for the moon, just because it really supports a lot of the natural kind of lunar things that we really want, and knowing how to build those lunar things, and knowing how to have that strong family values and that core beliefs and those really great solid beautiful values and morals and ethics that comes with Venus in Cancer and the Moon in Taurus, being able to feel those things and feel that emotional security, as well as Moon in Libra. Moon in Libra, Venus in Cancer is still a great mutual reception with Moon Venus, but it does have this more of a relational part of it, obviously, and with the Libra Cancer square, there is going to be a need to kind of bring this into relationships that might be a little bit more of a difficulty, but they both have major aspects between the Moon and Venus in both of these examples, so this does allow for a good emotional conversation to be had, and it softens the moon. Even if the moon's in Libra with Venus in Cancer, it still softens that moon's ability to feel its feelings. And obviously, too, you're going to want to look to see what the aspects that are happening to the moon and Venus in this example, or any example, is too. But just for mutual reception's case, it's important to know what the what your feelings are and how those feelings are valuable, right? And not necessarily how to protect them or fight for them or build them or, impulse control, right? That's a lot of what the moon Mars is. But the moon Taurus and the moon Venus mutual reception is a lot of like learning how to really sit with the feelings and the emotions and see what you want to build something on. And it's very soft and it's very artistic as well with the moon Venus mutual reception. I like this one a lot. Now the moon Mercury mutual reception. This is where you're going to see more of a natural poet with this, someone who is naturally able to communicate emotions, a great counselor. Moon Mercury mutual receptions are great counselors. So even just Mercury in Cancer and Moon in Gemini or Virgo alone are going to have great emotional conversational ability, as well as just a great gift of softening someone through their own voice and their own words. And so when these two are in mutual reception, the emotional conversations is a big part of this. And being able to communicate about the family's feelings, the family's goals, the family's secrets, and being able to kind of dig into people's ancestry or your own ancestry especially, and be able to communicate, find the truth in that, and find the conversations or kind of tweak it so that you can ensure that you're presenting the right information about your family or the right beliefs. And you'll see that too with the moon Jupiter mutual reception here too in a second. But it's a lot about really being able to bring out and speak for the family, be the spokesperson for people's ancestry or family or heritage or their emotions or their loved ones, or their psychological safety, being able to create that safety. So that's one of my favorite ones for the moon too. I like the moon mutual reception ones because these are the ones that you're more likely to have, because these kind of happen way more often. For even example with Jupiter in Cancer, which actually we have to go to next, so we did the moon in Leo. With Jupiter in Cancer, there's going to be 12, at least 12 months that the moon, or 12 lunar, 12 times within the year that the moon will be in Sagittarius. So each month the moon will be in Sagittarius for about 2 days. So the moon Jupiter mutual reception is really common. A lot of the moon mutual receptions are more common than the average because the moon is the quickest moving planet. And so while all these planets are in Cancer, the sun's in Cancer, Mercury's in Cancer, Venus in Cancer, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and they all spend their own amounts of time in the sign of Cancer, the moon will always, for the most part, without fail, the moon will always go through one of those signs in that mutual reception throughout that time. So this is the most common one to have. And then when it comes to like Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter's in Cancer for about, let's just say for easy math, for exactly 12 months. And in those 12 months, the moon will be in Sagittarius 12 times and will be in Pisces 12 times, give or take, right? And then adding the fact that it's about 2 days, that's about 48 days out of the year, that you're going to see a moon Jupiter mutual reception when Jupiter is in Cancer. So that's something that I think is really, really beautiful to think about with this, is that a lot of you that have Jupiter in Cancer will have a moon mutual reception, just because simply of the commonality of that moon always cycling through, and will inevitably land in Sagittarius or Pisces while Jupiter's in Cancer. And I think this is one of the ones that we really see a lot of philanthropists, a lot of family teachers, a lot of philosophers as well, but this is where the family's heritage, the family's beliefs really come into question, and really become something of really grave importance, especially because Jupiter exalts in Cancer, so it does really well here. And so when you see Jupiter in Cancer with the moon in Sagittarius or Pisces, the emotional exploration, the meaning behind the family, the meaning behind the feelings becomes a lot more prominent, and the ability to find and extract meaning from the family heritage is so important. And all the things about this Cancer with mutual reception with the moon, all of these are going to have a quality about them that are very family-based, that are very emotional, safety-based, like I had said with the previous slide, where it's all about emotional care and safety and ancestry and family karma and reconditioning the processes of one's emotions. So when it comes to the moon Jupiter, it's about trying to find the meaning behind why you're processing the way you are, or can I learn to process my emotions in a different way, or can my parents or my family teach me how to do that differently, or can I teach someone differently to feel their feelings differently or express their feelings differently in that regard. And then with the moon in Capricorn, Aquarius, with Saturn in Cancer, this is once again even honestly more common than Jupiter moon, only because Saturn spends a lot more time in the sign of Cancer. So if you have Saturn in Cancer, your likelihood of having your moon in Capricorn or Aquarius is same as before, about 48 times out of the year, but Saturn spends about 2.5 years through each sign. So that's going to be well over 115 times, 115 days out of that 2.5 year period that you will have a moon-Saturn mutual reception. And this is where you'll see a lot of the heavier emotional responsibility coming up, a lot of the need to emotionally caretake and protect and build that family heritage. You'll see that a lot. And with the moon Capricorn and Saturn in Cancer, this is a major aspect here. So this is a big opposition, and the opposition in and of itself is a Saturnian type of aspect. So this is something that you'll see a really, really, really prominent emotional strength, emotional depth, emotional responsibility within the family that you'll see with this moon Capricorn Aquarius and Saturn in Cancer. And I will end up explaining as we get to these next ones here in a moment, the difference between how Mercury's mutual receptions are, and now we start moving into all the rest of them after here on forward will be dual rulerships. But overall with the moon, we're going to see this really deep emotional care that's needed, this really deep emotional responsibility as it relates to the Saturn and Moon mutual reception, and kind of really being able to solidify that emotional center. But it all comes from building that emotional center from within. All the moon ones are all about building from your emotional center and your own emotional strength and your own ability to feel your own feelings and understand where those come from, why they're there, what their purpose is, find the right words for them and find the right structure for them and the right place and use for them as it comes to that Saturn there. So let's move on to a mutual reception with Mercury. So this is where we're going to start getting into a little bit more of the complicated parts of this, where we're going to see the differences between, dual rulerships, right? Because now we're going to have, not just one sign, right? Because with the sun, it's Leo, with the moon, it's Cancer. Now we're going to have both Gemini and Virgo. So we're going to have a lot more to go through moving forward. But anywho, so mutual reception with Mercury. And so mutual reception with Mercury, we're going to see a lot of these key themes coming up when Mercury is in mutual reception, because Mercury especially, out of all of the planets, really becomes whatever sign it's in, and especially mutual reception, it really accentuates that specific combination because of the natural ability that Mercury has to adapt to the sign and the kind of themes that Mercury is placed in throughout the specific zodiac order, right? So a couple things about mutual reception with Mercury. One of the big things is sharing of one's own perspectives and opinions, because that's what Mercury is all about. Knowing how to share your story, how to speak on what you want to speak on, ability to utilize and teach discernment is a really big part of this as well. Being able to kind of know how to navigate situations and communicate and speak very, very eloquently, and has a lot of ability to navigate conversational directions and kind of misdirections and all these things. Mercury is a very adaptable planet, like I had said, and so it has this big ability in mutual reception to be able to adapt and to be able to utilize and teach discernment and direction and guide someone with their own thoughts, their own mind, and being able to kind of teach from a mental perspective. And of course about information acquisition, and then finally mental health, because Mercury does rule that ability to kind of quiet the mind and work within the mind and kind of understand that those mental concepts and mental constructs and how they work for you or work kind of to your detriment, right? As we'll see, that was kind of a little funny, funny joke with that, with Mercury detriment, right? As my Mercury Jupiter mutual reception. So in detriment, right? For those of you that didn't get that. Now, with Mercury mutual reception with Mercury, like I had said before, we're going to see two different mutual receptions, right? So we're going to see mutual reception between Gemini and Virgo. So Mercury will have reception in both. So for example, in my chart, I have Mercury in the sign of Jupiter. If I had Jupiter in the sign of Gemini as opposed to Virgo, it would have the same sort of mutual reception quality, meaning it would still be within mutual reception, but it would be very different in how that Mercury is kind of playing out, right? Because Mercury Jupiter with Jupiter Virgo is different than Jupiter Gemini. And it's very interesting for me to be recording this right now as Jupiter is currently in Gemini. And it is very interesting, very different to think about how Gemini works within my own mutual reception versus Virgo, okay? So once again, as you guys know, this is my mutual reception kind of era point. So obviously I have biases here, so know that that's kind of where I'm coming in from with that. But I do want to kind of just tell my personal story for context so you guys understand that as well once I get to that. But there is definitely a very distinct difference between Gemini and Virgo. Now, with Gemini mutual reception, you're going to see an external focus of Mercury. So Gemini is all about the external themes, taking the information from the outside world, understanding all these things, and being able to kind of navigate the gift of the gab, if you will. Navigate the day-to-day, have those conversations, know the information, trying to find all the things and find all the facts and kind of go out and gather all of that stuff that you need to. More themes are going to be related to one's own story and one's own perspective and their ability to share that story with the world with that Gemini there. And it will come up, I will have more of an explorative nature than the Virgo mutual reception, because Virgo is more of an internal focus. It's more of a building from within, building that kind of solid kind of internal critic that is able to help the other planet that's in Mercury's mutual reception to bring itself into words and be able to find the right words to connect those two things. And so the internal focus of Mercury is where Virgo kind of comes in, where there's more themes related to perfecting one's message and testing other ways one may be able to learn, right? It has a more critical nature than the Gemini mutual reception. Gemini is very airy and fun and enjoyable. Virgo is very perfectionistic. How can I make this perfect? How can I find the right and best way to work with all the details that I'm being given and really ground that, okay? Now, let's move on to mutual reception with Mercury part 1, which is going to be the Gemini placements. So we're going to see Mercury in Aries or Scorpio and Mars in Gemini. I actually have the amazing privilege of having someone I know who has this this mutual reception of Mercury and Mars, with Mercury in Aries and Mars in Gemini. And I also know a fellow astrologer who has this Mercury in Scorpio, Mars in Gemini. And it's a very combative ability, very quick ability, very mentally fast, because their mind is very mentally engaged at all times. And there's a lot of mental acuity, and kind of like I had said with Mercury mutual reception in general, there's a key theme of specifically information acquisition and the ability to utilize and teach discernment, and that kind of ability to share of one's own perspective and opinions, and then navigate the different kind of information that's being presented to them and regurgitate that or work within that process, right? And so when we see Mercury Mars, this is going to be fighting for one's own opinion, their own voice, taking a lot of information, knowing how to debate, knowing how to utilize their words to create change, and to maybe be selfish for selfish's sake, being able to really understand a lot of information and work with that information to find the right motivations for that, right? Being able to take in so much stuff and have so many different conversations and learn something and kind of bring their own opinion to something. They always have something to say, and it definitely is something that is valuable, but once again, kind of with the moon Mars that I spoke about, it's about that impulse control. But this is impulse control from the mind, right? Some mental kind of control, knowing how to hold one's tongue. Can kind of be a Mercury-Mars mutual reception, and also a Mercury-Saturn mutual reception. We'll see that as well, but that's a little bit more on the more of the kind of like muted side than the Mercury-Mars is more of quite literally holding one's tongue to not create conflict in that regard. But once again, this makes someone extremely motivating, extremely powerful, extremely potent in their ability to stay up to date with information, really be smart, and really be very, very knowledgeable. And knowing how to work with someone's just information in their eyes in specific for Gemini. So this person I'm referring to is my family member who works within a optometrist, like an eye doctor's office, and does a lot of transportation, does a lot of driving, does a lot of those things, and has a lot of really strong opinions about driving as well, which is very Gemini. Mercury rules that process as well, so it definitely showed up quite literally for the person I know in that regard. And there is a lot of just wanting to be a driver and drive around and do work for commuting and driving and the eyes and those sorts of things too. Now, Mercury-Venus mutual reception, this is where you're going to see a lot more poets, a lot more lyricists, whether Mercury's in Taurus, Libra, or Mercury's in Taurus and Libra. Venus and Virgo can definitely be very different than this, but Mercury in Taurus with Venus and Venus in Gemini can definitely have a very, very strong quality to it of creating softness through their words, creating value, artisticness, a lot of artistic writers have this. Now, with this, I want to bring up Mercury in Taurus, Venus in Gemini, definitely possible. Mercury in Libra, Venus in Gemini, no, unless we're doing a synastry, right? This is where you'll see Mercury in Libra with Venus in Virgo, that combination. And so it's important to know that Mercury and Taurus will be in Venus and Gemini, but I did put I put them in both so that you can see that just the understanding of kind of understand the concept. Now, Mercury-Venus mutual reception has this quality of just creating value with their words, creating value with what they write, being able to make money off what they write as well. And so you'll see the Mercury-Venus mutual reception having a very prominent mind and knowing the value of their mind and their opinion and their story. You'll see that a lot there. Mercury-Moon mutual reception. This is where there is, I think I spoke about this with the moon Mercury mutual reception before, but it's a lot about finding the right ways to communicate one's feelings. And being able to really be the spokesperson for that family model in that regard. You'll see that a lot with whenever the moon is involved. You'll see a lot of those conversations around family and around the family model and around how to extract the information, and really talking about siblings too in this example with Mercury, Cancer, Moon, and Gemini. Those sibling conversations can be really big, or the conversation with neighbors is going to be a really big thing to kind of bring into the average daily experience. Then Mercury, Leo, Sun, and Gemini. This, once again, is something that you won't see. You won't see this. This won't happen in your own natal chart, but this is something that can be of a nice support for those that are in relationship with the Sun and Gemini, Mercury and Leo. Like if you have Mercury and Leo and you're with Sun and Gemini, or you're a Sun and Gemini with someone Mercury and Leo, it can definitely help you bring that identity into one another and kind of help each other see one another. But once again, this is something that doesn't actually exist within a natal chart. It cannot exist, but it is something that is important to bring up so you understand that concept of how mutual reception can transpose to other things. And this is a lot about communicating one's identity and one's conversation about who they want to be. And you'll see this a lot with Mercury and Leo, Sun and Virgo, which we'll get to in a moment, even though we just did it previously, but we'll do it again. And then Mercury, Jupiter with Jupiter and Gemini, Mercury and Sag and Pisces. So this is where, once again, you're going to see a lot of information. I, of course, have Mercury and Sag with Jupiter and Virgo, but there's a lot of conversations around a lot of information, right? And now that Jupiter is in Gemini, I'm definitely seeing a lot different of how information is being presented to me, and how my Mercury-Jupiter self is absorbing that information. It's a lot of surprising, a lot of output of information, which is more Gemini than input, and more of a kind of like trying to digest it with the Virgo side of stuff that you see with Jupiter in Virgo. And so Mercury-Jupiter mutual reception, in this example with Jupiter in Gemini, I can only assume it's a lot more of the output of information and kind of that constant churning of information, and less of the kind of like internal process that I spoke on in that big difference between Virgo and Gemini, of kind of like the digestion of one's own opinion and beliefs and those sorts of things. And this is more about acquisition and kind of outward expression of one's beliefs, with Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, with Mercury in Sag or Pisces. Now Mercury in Pisces, Jupiter in Gemini, this can have definitely a quite an interesting quality to it, because they're going to have it's going to be someone who has a creative vision but is really hard to grasp it, and needs to kind of explore a bunch of different ones and then kind of make it in that process of exploration. You'll see that a lot with that too. Now, Mercury-Saturn mutual reception, this is where you're going to see the slower acquisition of knowledge, acquisition of information, understanding how to speak one's truth, and knowing how to share one's opinion to a conversation. You'll see that a lot with Mercury, Saturn. You're definitely going to see writers, strong authoritative writers, and people that are writing books and things like that, especially after the Saturn return. A lot of that, we'll get to that with Saturn when we get there. But now we have mutual reception with Mercury with Virgo instead. So the difference between Virgo and Gemini, like I had said, is going to have Virgo is going to have an internal focus of kind of trying to digest a lot of information. Gemini is going to have that external focus of trying to kind of like relay or bring in or explore more information is kind of the right word for that. Now, Mercury-Mars with Mars in Virgo, it's going to have a little bit more of a more analytical person. You'll see this with someone who is more methodical with the way that they are using their information, especially with Mercury is in Scorpio, Mars is in Virgo. You're going to see a lot more of a perfectionistic nature to how they choose to use the information that's being presented to them. And it's once again about that impulse control of the information and their word, and they're kind of holding one's tongue. And so Mars in Virgo, Mercury in Scorpio, it's about, and I find this with, especially after knowing my own placement more, it's about really sitting with that and sitting with one's information with Virgo, and knowing how to utilize that information. And it might plan a lot, right? Plan a lot of things, make lots of lists, but it's about trying to find the right things to speak on, and how to perfect one's message. There's a lot about that with Mercury Mars, and how to perfect one's motivation and one's story and one's kind of concepts they want to bring out, or one's message really is really what I'm sensing here. Now, Mercury Venus, this is where you're going to see Mercury in Taurus and Venus in Virgo is not, once again, not possible, because that is way too far from one another. But Mercury in Libra and Venus in Virgo is very much possible. And this is where you'll see a lot of the poets once again, except this is going to be someone who is more really trying to bring, it's not necessarily going to be someone, in the other example where it was Taurus and Gemini, that's someone who's like more bringing their voice into art, making art with it. Yes, with Mercury, Libra, Venus, Virgo, it's very possible. But this is someone who is really more in the trying to find the perfect way to love themselves and love others, and find the right words. So these are the ones that are going to really be really great, like therapists for people and marriage family counselors, right? You'll see that a lot with this. People that are really learning how to communicate really deeply about their relationships with others, and how to perfectly kind of understand someone else and understand themselves and what they want to bring to a relationship. Mercury, Cancer, Moon, and Virgo, I kind of already spoke on that, but it's a lot about having the emotional conversations and knowing how to emotionally digest and then bring that into the right words and the right wording. Mercury in Leo, Sun in Virgo. This is the one that does exist, where the Mercury in Leo, Sun in Gemini cannot exist, at least within a natal chart. It can exist within Synastry, so definitely has some value there of supporting you. But when it comes to Sun in Virgo, Mercury in Leo, this actually has a pretty nice combination where there's a really good identification conversation being had, and a lot of like knowing who you are and almost communicating more so too much. This is someone who may have a stronger story to tell about themselves. That's self-focused, or find themselves at a very much, they're trying to digest how their role fits into everything around them, and being able to find the right words for that. Now, Mercury in Sag, Jupiter in Virgo. So obviously this is mine. Something I want to bring up that I find really interesting about my mutual reception that I have run into many times, and I didn't even bring this up until now, but is that I have this difficult problem where, and I've kind of learned how to work with it throughout the years, but what I tend to do is I tend to either over-explain something when I don't need to, but I leave out very important details, or I do the opposite and I under-explain and I don't put in what is needed, and I don't give enough context. Either give too much context or I give not enough context, and it's very hard to kind of get that magic kind of middle ground with that. I've learned how to do that because for my Mercury Jupiter, there is a lot of context I can give. I can always give more context, and so it's a lot about learning to give less and then elaborate on that later. But also in the same vein, my Mercury Jupiter self mutual reception can get very overwhelmed with the volume of information that I am trying to understand. I have this other problem where I try to put all of the things on the table at once. I try and look at every problem at the same time, and that's not healthy, and that's not possible. To address every problem at the same time and deal with every problem at the same time, you cannot do that. And that's where my Mercury Jupiter definitely falls short and has its own difficulties. In that same vein, my Mercury Jupiter has been able to obviously learn a lot about astrology and learn a lot about philosophy, religion, and languages. I pick up languages very, very easily. I've always been that way. My ability to kind of just understand other cultures and learn about other cultures has been very large. Being able to communicate, just have a lot of different cultural conversations is a really big part of it as well. And then of course, doing motivational speaking and teaching has definitely been a big part of my own journey, and mental health as well, and learning how to extract the meaning from my own experience and digest all the information that is being presented to me, and being able to take it one day at a time and present the information in a digestible manner is a really big part of it too. And I am hoping that this is a very digestible presentation thus far for you to kind of follow along with the Mercury Jupiter thing we're at now. Now, Mercury in Capricorn and Saturn in Virgo. I also wanted to talk about a little bit about Mercury, Pisces, Jupiter, and Virgo. This is where you're going to see kind of the similar thing I said about myself, except you're going to see with Mercury in Pisces, there is a lot more of a spiritual concept to this, a lot more of a creative part of it, whereas Mercury in Sag for me is always about trying to find the meaning and extract the meaning that people already know is there, and be able to work within the framework of like psychology and within the framework of energetics that people understand, like astrology, right? A provable kind of like, this is the planets where they work type of thing. Not necessarily, even though I have, not necessarily the, mediumship, the energy, those sorts of things, which are very Pisces, and kind of the vibes and the kind of energy healing, which I still do, right? Very much, but different with Mercury and Pisces, Jupiter and Virgo, where there's more of a experiential kind of mindset that can be a little bit harder to ground than the Mercury and Sagittarius that is in concepts that are within our own societal framework already, whether it's laws, whether it's mentorships, whether it's teachers, whether it's colleges and college courses, about those things. So then Mercury in Capricorn, Aquarius, and then Saturn in Virgo. This is where you're going to see more of the self-critic, this is where they're really going to need to kind of get themselves up in the morning and really fight for what they want to do and understand their day-to-day and what they need to get done. It's a lot of what you'll see with that Mercury-Saturn mutual reception, about the mental responsibility one has and their capability to accomplish as much as they can while they're here. I think that's a lot about what the Virgo kind of part of Mercury is also about with mutual reception, is about understanding your limits of what you can and cannot accomplish physically and how you can digest all of these things. And I think for me with my Mercury Jupiter, it's something that I'm trying to learn so much so I can then teach so much. But sometimes you have to learn by simply going through and doing it. And it's funny because as I've been doing all of these videos, and although I've been learning and studying astrology and practicing astrology for 14 years now, doing all these videos I have been doing over the course of the last couple of years has further accentuated my own astrology gifts and abilities, because putting yourself both in the teacher and the student perspective at all times allows you to really really learn something new every time you remind yourself of these concepts. And so I think with Virgo mutual reception, it's a lot about knowing how to digest whatever you're trying to digest information-wise. And this is also just mutual reception with Mercury as well in Gemini, but in Virgo, it's a little bit about slowing that down and grounding it and finding a goal to put that information towards. And Saturn in Virgo definitely has that as well. And I think it's a lot about finding the right groundedness and the right speed at which to present the information and the right environments and the right sort of circumstances to address something and to speak on something. So that's something I think is really interesting when it comes to that mutual reception there. Now, to move on to mutual reception with Venus. So mutual reception with Venus, a couple things here. This is where you're going to see, once again, another dual quality with Venus in Taurus and Libra. When we see mutual reception with Venus, this is where we have more of a relational focus, obviously. So we have relational and financial lessons that are really highlighted with this, you'll see. Then we see, values, ethics, and moral guidelines, and those kind of ability to really foundationally build those. That's going to be a really big part of this with mutual reception with Venus, is how to build the specific foundation you are going to live your life off of, which is your values and your morals and your ethics. And then, of course, with Venus, another thing that I find really fun about mutual reception with Venus, and this is kind of tangential. Well, I'll go tangential in a second, but is the tangible and intangible wealth. And what I find, kind of going back to the mutual reception I have with Mercury and Jupiter, just to kind of really reiterate it, I really love language, and I love being able to take a lot of language and really kind of condense it and kind of take really big concepts and trying to put them into some kind of smaller words. And it's always difficult for me to kind of do a lot of these presentations sometimes, because it's something that I have so much information, and how do I make it so digestible and so tiny? And I think for this slide in specific, I struggled a little bit, but it was really cool to see how much you can fit within the idea of tangible and intangible wealth, because there's so much within those two themes that can kind of really be unboxed when it comes to Venus. And then relational lessons and financial lessons, those are really large schemes that can be really broken down into a lot of different ways. And then, of course, values, ethics, and moral guidelines are a huge part of anything with Venus. And so moving forward, we're going to move on to, once again, how are they different, just like we did with Mercury. How is Venus in Taurus or Taurus mutual reception different than Venus in Libra or Libra mutual reception? Now, so when we see, and this is kind of where we see the difference between tangible and intangible a little bit being highlighted here, because typically the Taurus Venus is more on the tangible value and tangible wealth, and then the Libra Venus is more on the relational and kind of social wealth that you'll see with that, or intangible wealth. Now, Taurus mutual reception becomes more important for the native to understand their tangible physical worth and to bring it into reality. And it's a more physical and individualized focus upon their values and kind of building that foundation, like I had mentioned earlier, than the Libra mutual reception. And then when it comes to Libra mutual reception, we're going to see the social interpersonal situations become highlighted. And that is where the native more easily connect to their values and morals. So you're going to see with the Libra mutual reception that there's going to be more of a relational and mental focus that's going to kind of come out. And this is where, kind of going back a little bit to the Mercury-Venus mutual reception that we had done when Mercury is in Libra, when Mercury is in Virgo, Mercury's in Libra, Venus is in Virgo. That one, it's a lot about learning that relational conversation in that regard. And we already went through that a little bit earlier with Mercury and Venus. So just knowing that when Venus is involved in the mutual reception, that there is a value overall being brought into question, or how to get one's value and how to sustain one's value, or how to bring that into reality, whether it through a conversation like this and kind of understanding it in the mental Libra mutual reception way, or in a tangible, physical, wealth-based or asset-based way as it comes with the Taurus mutual reception. So now let's start with mutual reception with Venus here. So one of the things that is quite interesting when we have mutual reception with Venus with stuff in Taurus, like I had said, we're going to see a lot more of the physical, tangible values being focused. So all the Taurus placements, which by the way, I have a video on my YouTube channel if you're interested in that, where I speak specifically about all of the Taurus placements and how they all kind of show up within a natal chart. So feel free to check that out if you're interested in that, because I definitely went through all of those. But when it comes to the first one, Venus in Aries, Venus in Scorpio, and Mars in Taurus. So Venus in Aries, Mars in Taurus is definitely common, very, very common. I see that kind of a lot. It actually happened recently. It happens pretty much about every 2 years or so. You'll see Venus in Aries and Mars in Taurus, because Venus kind of always stays within its own kind of sign around that, and then Mars will kind of stay around that sign every couple of years or so too. But anywho, so when we have a Mars-Venus mutual reception, and this is something that I was kind of really excited to talk about when we got to Venus, is certain planets are naturally paired with one another. So the Sun and Moon paired with one another, Venus and Mars are another pair that's really common. And then when it comes to Jupiter can pair with either Jupiter and Saturn or Jupiter and Mercury, kind of depends on how we look at those things. And then Saturn can, like I said, also kind of pair with Jupiter there too. So it really kind of depends. But for the most part, Sun and Moon and Venus and Mars are the most natural pairs that we understand, the most complementary of one another. So when we see a Venus-Mars mutual reception, this is one of the mutual receptions that I really, really like to see in a natal chart or in the synastry with one another, because it really supports the native or the relationship to really thrive in that give and take, and understanding the value that someone's bringing to the conversation, or how they're kind of working within that. And it's a really, really powerful energy to kind of bring to things when it comes to the mutual reception with Venus, when it comes to Venus and Mars, and also in turn the inverse, Mars and Venus. And so it's really about being able to very deeply understand one's relational values, relational kind of foundation to then bring to someone, how to bring that to someone, how to have that fight or flight, but the little dance, the little kind of Venus-Mars dance of kind of the courting of one another. That courting process when Venus and Mars is in mutual reception can definitely be a little bit more difficult, but it definitely allows for this person to understand it and kind of flow in it once they find their flow, once they find their values, find their person, find their ability to connect, and how they connect and how they want to go after someone, and how when they feel motivated and inspired, how they do that. And so that's a really powerful one when Venus and Mars are in mutual reception. I think it's really, really cool. Now, Venus-Mercury mutual reception, I think I talked about this already, but this is someone who's a really great communicator, really great, able to speak on a lot of different topics and bring their values into that conversation. Moon-Venus, I already spoke on that. Sun-Venus, I already spoke on that one as well previously. A lot of these we're going to kind of already visited, so it's going to get a little bit shorter as we progress, as we've gone through more and more of these. Jupiter, Venus we have not done, and this is where, this one I actually really like, because both Jupiter and Venus are both benefic planets. So they are both really supportive of one another. This is probably one of my favorite mutual receptions, especially if you have Venus in Pisces, Jupiter and Taurus, because they're a natural sextile. And so there's a really good natural supportive conversation these two planets are already having in regards to their own values versus the values at large, right? And that's kind of where Jupiter comes in, as the values at large, and Venus is your personal values, your personal morals, your personal ethics, your personal relationships, and how those can be expanded upon either from other people and their own values and their own different cultures and learnings and their own belief systems, or your ability to simply see your own value in different lights and different meanings and derive different meanings from your own experience in that way. So you'll see a lot with that Venus-Jupiter there. Venus-Saturn, this one has a little bit more on the frugal side. You'll see a lot of, especially with all the Saturn ones, all of them, you're gonna see a lot more of the growth of this over that Saturn return. And we'll get to that when we get to the Saturn portion in this, but the Venus-Saturn mutual reception is a lot of that delayed gratification and that solid building within someone's self of how can I maturely utilize my value, how can I make sure what I'm building it lasts the long term. And so you'll see this with people that have a really big investment kind of mindset, but they're able to really have a very strong sense of identity and sense of value after they've had to build it for quite a long time, and they really want to be with someone for a very long amount of time, and they can definitely feel a little bit muted or abandoned or neglected. But as they learn to sit with their own value and trust their own value and trust what they want to bring in and kind of trust that process, the more they're going to really be able to bring in a lot of value to a lot of conversations. Now Venus part 2 with Venus, Mars with Mars and Libra. This is a little bit different with Venus and Aries, Mars and Libra, or Venus and Scorpio, Mars and Libra. I personally know someone with a Venus, Scorpio, Mars and Libra, and it is quite interesting to see how they are within a relationship, because it's really about knowing how they understand the dance, but it's kind of like they understand the give and take within a relationship, but they're almost kind of doing it slightly backwards, but not wrong. It's kind of this it's really interesting dance that we tend to see with that when Venus and Mars are both supporting one another within that. Venus Mercury I already did, Venus Moon I already did, Venus Sun I already did, and then we're back to Venus in Sag or Pisces with Jupiter in Libra. And this is where, especially if we see, this Venus and Sag, because once again, a natural sextile between these two, this is where you'll see a lot more of that relational support. So all of these Libra ones, you're going to see a lot more of the relational values being brought out and the relational support being brought out as well, and the desire to have that relational support. Versus with the Taurus mutual reception, you're going to see a lot of your support coming from your own inner world, your own inner values, being able to build that. But then we go to the Libra mutual reception, that's where you're going to see more of the obviously the relational value being brought into it, the ability to connect with someone and see what their value is and bring that into your own value and bring that into merging with them and saying, are their values mine? Do I work with them? Do I not work with them? How can I merge with them, connect with them? How can I learn from what they're presenting to me? And with Venus, Jupiter, this is huge for, once again, the same, like I said before, about finding that meaning from someone else, learning from someone else's concepts, from their own belief systems, a lot of those things there. And then Venus, Saturn, same thing, with that kind of relational delay. Now, it's a little bit different than Saturn and Taurus, because Saturn and Libra has a lot more of a relational quality and a successful quality with who to partner with. So this can definitely have a lot stronger of that relational neglect and kind of the need to really, really discern that perfect person or find that really solid partner to either be with romantically or professionally, and kind of really know who to commit that energy to and commit your time to with that as well. Now, mutual reception with Mars. We're going on to Mars here. So this is where we see, obviously this is where Scorpio is introduced, so we're going to add a little bit more kind of flavor and pizzazz to these conversations here. So when we have Mars involved with mutual reception, this is where This is the first malefic, technically, that we have. And this is where we're going to see a little bit more of this natural mitigation or natural ease that we were talking about in the very beginning kind of come in, where it's a lot about understanding anger management, willpower, and energy, right? Knowing how to impulse control oneself, right? That's kind of what we saw when we talked about the Mercury-Mars mutual reception or the Moon-Mars mutual reception. We already kind of spoke about quite a lot of these already, kind of as we're going through this. But with mutual reception with Mars, a lot of the bigger themes are going to be that willpower and energy and that anger management and impulse control. A lot about empowerment of one's own goals and going after one's own goals. And then, of course, finally, another keyword for Mars mutual reception and just Mars in general is that physical energy and vitality, being able to go after what you want and have the energy to continuously go after your goals. So just know that's a part of it there. Now, another mutual reception notes, once again, as you know, you're kind of getting the gist of this, right? Kind of organizational Mercury-Jupiter thing I'm doing. So we have the Aries mutual reception versus Scorpio mutual reception. So when it comes to the Aries mutual reception, there's going to obviously be more importance on working and developing one's own will while building a sense of self-confidence. Learning self-assertion of will be a theme and more physically focused than the Scorpio mutual reception. So you're going to see a lot more of that fighting for one's thing, taking that impulse control, knowing how to go after what they want, knowing when to go after what they want, when to follow that impulse, when to follow that inspiration and that desire, and what those desires lead to, and how to follow through on those desires as well. Now, when it comes to Scorpio mutual reception, there's more focus put upon working within deeper realms of others, within their own psyche, to ensure the most success. It will have deeper lessons pertaining to intimacy and trust, and then more psychologically focused, obviously, than that Aries mutual reception, which is more on the own individual will. So, now, we're going to start with mutual reception with Mars, with Aries. So this is where we're going to see, once again, most of this we've already kind of done. So we've seen, Mars in Taurus, Venus in Aries, we've done that. Mars in Libra, Venus in Aries as well. This is where we're going to see this sort of, once again, the back and forth, the kind of conversation between the dance between feminine and masculine and knowing how to toe that line really well. And so I see a lot of people with Venus, Mars pretty prominent like this, especially mutual reception, where there's kind of this kind of queer aspect to it, or kind of like not necessarily super masculine, super feminine, and knowing how to kind of toe that line. You'll see that a lot there. Mars, Mercury, we did. Moon, Mars, with Mars in Cancer, we did as well. Moon in Aries, we did that in the Moon section. Sun, Aries, Mars, Leo, we did that as well. Now, Jupiter, Aries, Mars, Sag, Mars, Pisces. This has a little bit more on the belief quality to it, right? Where this is where you see someone who really is trying to find what they believe in, go after what they believe in, and follow their faith, follow their religion, follow their belief system, know what that belief is, and stick to it, and drive themselves towards their own beliefs and their own values, and knowing what that is, and being able to follow that belief impulse and use their own belief as their own guiding light through what they've already accomplished and already survived. Now, this one's really interesting. The Mars Capricorn, Saturn in Aries, or Mars Aquarius, Saturn in Aries. This one is quite unique because when Mars is specifically Mars in Capricorn, Saturn in Aries, this is when we see a really strong will, and a really big desire in how to bring that will to long-term goals. Because Mars exalts in Capricorn and Saturn is considered fallen in Aries. So there's a really interesting quality between these two at odds with one another of really trying to fight for their own long-term goals and know how to fight for what they want, but knowing when, once again, to control that impulse and know how to put those brakes on and when to go after what they want and know how far they want to go and how much once they start something they must complete it to its fruition and learn all of what has to be learned through that process of whatever it is they went after. Now, we move on to mutual reception with Mars with Scorpio. So this is when we talk about Pluto. So, Pluto here, we can definitely have, some qualities here when it comes to Pluto being involved. So on the left side of this, we can see, obviously we have Venus in Scorpio here, Mercury in Scorpio, Moon in Scorpio, all those sorts of things, a lot of which we've already kind of gone through. But if we were to put, Pluto in place of the Mars on the left side here, we would see, you know, Pluto in Taurus, Pluto in Libra, and that Venus in Scorpio, or Pluto in Gemini, Pluto in Virgo, and that Mercury in Scorpio, Pluto in Cancer, Pluto in Leo, those sorts of things. And so the thing about this is that we do see that there are, you know, there's a Mars, there's a Pluto in, you know, Virgo generation, Leo generation, maybe even Cancer generation still around now, as well as obviously Sag, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Scorpio, Libra, that are all kind of being brought into these sorts of conversations. So, for example, my father, he has his Pluto in Virgo, Mercury in Scorpio, okay? And yes, this definitely does create a stronger Mars-Mercury conversation, and also a strong Pluto-Mercury conversation. And I think it's the same to be said for those that have Jupiter in Scorpio and Pluto in Sagittarius, which are like a very small amount, very, very small amount, if not none, because I think, there's some because it's 12 years apart. But then there is also, you know, those that have Pluto in Capricorn and Saturn in Scorpio as well. So just know that there's definitely ways that this can happen. I might be overcomplicating it right now, so I probably shouldn't even be doing this, but I'm doing it. It's about knowing when Pluto's involved. The reason I didn't put Pluto in this is because, once again, as you can tell, it's going to complicate a lot of it. But it's about, when it comes to Scorpio, overall, Scorpio and Pluto, it's about knowing the power. It's about knowing the depth. It's about knowing the darkness. It's about knowing your ability to go really, really deep into something and feel very disempowered by whatever that is, and be able to return to your empowerment state from being so disempowered, from desiring so deeply of that thing, okay? Now, when we see Mars in Taurus, and I'm just going back to Mars here and kind of retracting from the Pluto thing, when we see Mars in Taurus and Venus in Scorpio, or we see, you know, Mars in Cancer and Moon in Scorpio, we're still going to see a really deep plutonic urge with planets in Scorpio to purify whatever it is that planet is in, right? Mercury in Scorpio, purifying the mind. Moon in Scorpio, purifying the emotions. Sun in Scorpio, purifying the identity. And then Jupiter in Scorpio, purifying the beliefs. Or Sun in Scorpio, purifying the authority and that relationship with authority. Venus in Scorpio, purifying the actual relationships with itself and its value system. So knowing how Scorpio kind of plays out within Mercury, with the mutual reception, it's a lot deeper of an evolution because of the natural, at least within evolutionary astrology, there's a lot more depth that comes with these specific Scorpio placements that kind of accentuate any planets in Scorpio to have more of a evolutionary purpose that already brings them to Pluto's level, essentially. And so know that as we go through this, but just know too that Mars also has a lot to do with this as well, of that motivation and how we go after what we want. And so most of these we've already gone through here. We've gone through the Mars-Venus one, the Mars-Mercury one, the Mars-Moon one, the Mars-Sun one, Mars-Jupiter, and Mars-Saturn. The Mars-Jupiter, this is where there's going to be a lot of deep, with Jupiter and Scorpio more so, there's going to be a lot more of the deep psychological belief kind of stuff, a lot more of those sort of like really wanting to understand what the belief and the meaning behind what they're going through is. And knowing how to really experience a lot of depth and a lot of darkness, and learn from a lot of people's depth and darkness and issues and their own misunderstandings of their own beliefs, and their own like kind of following of someone else's unethical beliefs can be a thing with this Mars-Jupiter mutual reception, and knowing how to follow the right beliefs, and specifically with Jupiter and Scorpio. Whereas with the Mars-Jupiter in Aries, it's more about following your own beliefs. They're kind of the same, one and the same, but one goes added a little bit more on the kind of like through the trenches when it comes to the Scorpionic side of it, versus kind of about a bravery with the Aries side of stuff. And then the Mars-Saturn, with Saturn and Scorpio, Mars and Capricorn, this definitely has more of a learning how to trust themselves, to go deeper. That's what you'll see with all the Scorpio placements, is the ability to go deeper with one person or with more people, and kind of share and bear their soul to people. That's what you see a lot with Scorpio placements. I have a lot of them too, so I get it. I don't have mutual reception with Scorpio, but it is something that I definitely can relate to, that kind of story there. So it's a lot about knowing the motivations and how those motivations relate to, specifically with Mars, Jupiter, with how your motivations relate to what you believe in, and how those those unethical beliefs, because there's a lot about Scorpio, about ethics as well. Those unethical beliefs and the kind of mismanagement, how people mismanaged or misused whatever that is against you, to use that for your own willpower and use that for your own motivation to get you to what you need to get done, essentially. Now, Mars and Saturn, this is once again more of that structural kind of working with authority kind of thing you'll see a lot. So there's that there too. We're gonna move on though, because I don't want to get too far on that. Now, Jupiter. Jupiter mutual reception, and this is so fun to do this one because obviously I have the Mercury mutual reception and Jupiter mutual reception. So as I looked through these and kind of revisited this, I was like, this is very much me, because a lot of these things kind of came up. And so with mutual reception with Jupiter, a lot of these keywords you'll see here are, law, mentorship, spiritual concepts, and cultural exploration kind of become really highlighted with the Jupiter mutual reception. Faith and meaning-based lessons become highlighted with Jupiter mutual reception. And truth-seeking based upon religion, faith, and spiritual experiences also become part of the mutual reception with Jupiter. Now, how are they different? Once again, Jupiter's mutual reception with Sagittarius teaches through beliefs of elders or mentorships that may become more prominent throughout the native's life, leading by belief and acquired knowledge and teaching through actions or words. Whereas for Pisces mutual reception, this is teaching through connection to internal spiritual truth and internal kind of processes, and leading by vibes, and connecting to the higher power when moving throughout the day. So there is a very big difference between Sag and Pisces that I tend to kind of bring up quite often in my sessions, is this ability of Sag is something we know, something we believe in, something that has been taught to us, that we know exists from other elders, from our peers, from society at large, from the laws that we know, where we can go and hop on a plane and we can fly to a different country, and there's a whole different culture and a different world out there that we know is out there. Versus Pisces is this world we know is out there, but we can't quite grasp it in the same way because it's sensed, it's felt with a vibe, it's understood internally, it's kind of experienced in a way that is so profound in a lot of senses of these kind of spiritual concepts that come to us through premonitions or dreams or visitations. And that's where Pisces kind of comes in, and you'll see that with there's a very big difference with Jupiter being in Pisces versus Jupiter being in Sagittarius. And once again, as we talk about the Pisces portion, I'll talk about that Neptune part there too. Okay, mutual reception with Jupiter. Most of these we kind of already went through. Mars, Jupiter mutual reception, we literally just did with Jupiter in Aries, Mars in Sagittarius. Jupiter in Taurus, Venus, we already did that one as well. A lot of these we already did. Mercury in Sag, Jupiter, Virgo, and Gemini, we did that as well too. Moon, Jupiter, we did those. We did a lot of these. So really the only one we have to really revisit, or not revisit, but rehash, is the Jupiter-Saturn mutual reception, honestly, because most of these have already been finished through the previous ones that we've already done. And it really kind of depends on which one you're framing as the kind of focus point, right? And I just went through and listed all of them, so we all know. And a lot of this, once again, is reiteration and kind of retelling the same thing as my Mercury Jupiter self does, and rewrites the same thing just for that kind of explanation. Because I'd rather have it like this as opposed to too little information and not have you understand the concepts. So anywho, so all of these we've pretty much gone through, but once again, with that mutual reception with Jupiter and Sagittarius, it's all about what we already know, what has been taught to us, what we've learned from school and society and mentors and things of that nature. And then the only one in this one we haven't talked about is Jupiter in Capricorn and Saturn in Sagittarius. And this is where, when Jupiter is connected with Saturn in mutual reception, this is where you're going to see a very prominent kind of need to solidly bring up one's beliefs and kind of solidly know what is of value still, and what needs to be kind of rehashed and revisited, and what needs to be stabilized, and what needs to be discarded, what needs to be completely gone. And Saturn in Sag is different than Saturn in Pisces, obviously. Where Saturn in Sag, Jupiter in Capricorn, or Jupiter in Aquarius even, there is a very distinct difference with their belief systems and where they come from. So Jupiter in Capricorn, Saturn in Sag, this I don't think ever really happened, at least in the last 30 years or so. The most recent Saturn and Sagittariuses do not have Jupiter in Capricorn or Aquarius. So that's not really of relevance. But it is something that obviously can happen within a synastry as well. So Jupiter and Capricorn, Saturn and Sag, it's a lot about that the beliefs around understanding of one's own belief system, and how that belief system relates to the long term, how it can be solidified and used consistently throughout their history and throughout history previously and throughout the future, with that there. And so it's a really, really cool one. And once again, I kind of want to bring this up, but it is important to think about this as synastry as well too, of people that have Jupiter and Capricorn and working with people that have Saturn and Sag, because there's going to be some supportive energies between those two there. And then now we have mutual reception with Jupiter with Saturn and Pisces. And this is where, when it comes to Pisces stuff, the Neptune part comes in. And so what's interesting is that there is, both with this one and the next one, you're going to see, for those of you that are millennial / Gen Z, there is a mutual reception that we naturally have within those that have Saturn in Pisces and those that have Saturn in Aquarius, because there is a Neptune in Capricorn, Saturn in Pisces generation that exists, as well as a Uranus in Aquarius and Saturn in Aquarius. I'm sorry, Uranus, Capricorn, Saturn, Aquarius generation that exists as well. And so those are their own really unique mutual receptions that we were able to have, and I will kind of speak on that, I guess, now at this point to kind of add more value to this, even though I didn't really intend to do that, because Neptune does have a lot to say with this, and so we're going to see a lot of Neptunian qualities if we were to put the modern rulers in here, but once again, it would be way too long. It already is a pretty long presentation already as it stands. But when we talk about those that have Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Capricorn, it really allows for the dissolving of society's idea of what a career is, and kind of having really creative careers and having really artistic careers and having careers that are really based upon their own imagination and their own spiritual concepts. And so the Neptune and Capricorn generation, I am still a part of that generation, although I am not a Saturn in Pisces. I do not have mutual reception. I have seen so much while Saturn has been in Pisces of the uptick of spiritual businesses and spiritual concepts being brought into the mainstream media and into society at large, and brought to their more capitalistic jobs, and kind of brought into making a job out of bringing that stuff, those spiritual concepts, into reality. And so we see with all of these Pisces mutual receptions that there is this overarching theme of bringing something etheric or non-physical into the physical, whether it's through our own emotions, our ability to ground that and feel our feelings, or our identity and how we show up, or our words or our values, or how we go after what we want, and how we motivate people through our spiritual gifts and our spiritual guidance, and kind of using that as our guiding light. And with Saturn in Pisces, it's really about solidifying a new spiritual truth or spiritual concept for us to kind of really accept and ground moving forward. So it's really powerful in that regard. And so those of you that have Saturn in Pisces and Neptune and Capricorn, you definitely have mutual reception that is quite prominent, and it's a whole generation that has that. And so lean into that, lean into the mutual reception between Neptune and Saturn that really has, I won't be going too deep into it right now. If you guys have more questions about that, feel free to let me know, but there is a lot there of really leaning into that, and there's plenty of articles on that as well, so look into that if you're interested in further. Now, final one, mutual reception with Saturn. So this is responsibility and career focus, obviously, theme of reality and groundedness, and obviously grows over time and with maturity. And so with Saturn here, how are they different? Once again, we have Capricorn and Aquarius. So with the Capricorn mutual reception, we have lessons focused upon structural changes and career focus and long-term acquisition after working for long amounts of time, and it's more physically focused than Aquarius. And then Aquarius mutual reception is learning to master their authority through social inclusion and relational growth, themes surrounding finding their place in the collective, and more intellectually focused than Capricorn. So this is where you're going to see people that are finding what their desires are and where they fit within society and what society wants them to do when we see that in Aquarius. So now, once again, most of these things we have done already here with mutual reception and Saturn. We did almost, if not all of these, actually. We did every single one of these mutual receptions previously, so we don't really have to go through any of these, funny enough, to kind of reiterate them. But when anything is in Capricorn, once again, it's a lot about those key themes of that structural change, that career focus, and that long-term goal that we took a long time to deal with. And when it comes to Saturn mutual reception, all these things are really gonna open up around that Saturn return, and those Saturn transits are gonna have a really big, solid key theme and key kind of releasing of stress that tends to happen with that mutual reception with Saturn and those Saturn periods. So pay attention to what happens during that Saturn return, especially if you have a Capricorn mutual reception with Saturn versus an Aquarius one. Although, once again, also pay attention to Saturn return if you have an Aquarius one too. But more importantly, to those ones that have Capricorn, because there's a lot of structural changes, a lot of solid changes that happen with that there. Now, with Aquarius, this is once again where I'm going to bring up the Saturn in Uranus in, well, yeah, it's actually definitely not in this I was looking for it in this slide, but it doesn't exist because Saturn is both Capricorn and Aquarius, and Uranus is Aquarius. So, what I just said about earlier about with Uranus in Capricorn generation with Saturn and Aquarius, they have a different way of bringing in a new thought, bringing in new technology, bringing in new ways of relating, new ways of connecting socially, right? When we see a mutual reception with both Saturn and Uranus, is about really being able to kind of bridge that gap between what we have solidified and where we are going. And so that's a really unique kind of space for Saturn to be with Uranus, and kind of that kind of really supportive aspect between those two in mutual reception, which I also have as well. And so there is a lot with everything being in Aquarius. It's a lot about needing to find the community, find the cause, find the way that you fit, and being able to really find the audience for those sorts of things. You'll see that a lot with Aquarius placements. Whenever anything is in an Aquarius kind of sector, it's about knowing how to connect with the society at large and who their audience is and who they're talking to. There's all about that sort of natural connection there. And so there is a lot of very different mutual receptions here. Obviously, I haven't gone through every single one of them in length, but there is a lot that can be said on all of these, as I'm sure you can tell with how long we've been going. And so Saturn here, once again, mutual reception with Saturn has a lot of these key themes related to reality, and bringing in something that is going to stay for a really long time and grow over time with that natural maturity, and being able to step into your maturity, step into your career, step into what you are physically here to do on this earth in all our ways. And so finally, some final takeaways about mutual reception. We're almost there. Mutual reception obviously can help you see astrology differently. That is why I love mutual reception, the concept of it. It has such a strong focus within my own chart, and it has been such a huge proponent to my ability to reframe my own astrology, and I hope I'm able to give that to you all as well. And mutual reception, once again, is a gift, and it can assist you in unique ways in a natal chart because of the fact that those planets are supporting one another in those houses, and those themes are really interwoven. And I really urge you to look at where these mutual receptions are happening within your own chart to see how these themes are interwoven and connected, and how those house topics with those mutual receptions are really kind of brought into one another in such a beautiful and supportive way, where it allows those lessons to kind of really be brought out. And I'm not going to be going through every single, I haven't gone through every single one, but because that would take literal hours. But if you have mutual reception in your chart and you feel the need to reach out to me, feel free to do that. I'm going to put my information on the screen here in the next couple of slides. But finally, it also, mutual reception, it allows you to understand the overall flow of your chart more naturally, because it doesn't focus on one placement. It actually cannot focus on one placement, because it is the reception between two planets and how those two planets are connecting and how the themes between those two. So if you were to isolate a mutual reception, there is almost this already kind of dualistic quality of kind of flowing between one another that is really supportive and understanding your chart in such a different landscape and such a different mindset and perspective, that I really hope this was able to help you with. And then finally, some closing notes and additional readings if you guys are interested in that. So one of the things that I reread and re-listened to prior to doing this whole presentation here, although I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do for this presentation, was that episode 287 of the Astrology Podcast, which is titled Reception, a Mitigating Factor Within Birth Charts. And then one article that I read that was really nice, that was called The Real Scoop on Mutual Reception, and that's on astrology.no. And then another one that has a bunch of resources is dayology.com. And this is where you can just type in the search mutual reception, and there will be bunch of articles if you want to read more about that, because there's so many more things within this, and I hope I set a good framework for you guys, a good foundation for you guys that you guys can take out. And if you guys are interested in any of those, feel free to check those out, obviously, and scour the internet. But those are the best ones that I would recommend starting with, especially that episode 287 of the Astrology Podcast. It's a really good one. It goes a little bit more advanced than what I am doing here today, just because it's for more of the astrology enthusiasts and those real in-depth astrologers there, with a lot of those there can be more jargon in that if you're not really as adept as astrology as other people, but it is definitely a valuable resource. And then, of course, there's other ones there too. But I really hope this was a great resource for all of you. And of course, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being able to sit through this and learn about mutual reception and learn about what the concepts are and how it works in your natal chart and how astrology can be so nuanced and so different and so unique in ways that we haven't even really focused in on in a lot of ways. And I'm so grateful to be able to have done this here. My Instagram is there, and my website is there as well if any of you are interested in connecting with me further, and booking a reading and kind of looking at your own mutual reception and kind of really leaning into that, because I also really love talking about this and really diving more deep into this. This won't be the first time I'll be talking about mutual reception. I will probably be talking a lot deeper about this topic, because it interests me and fascinates me in so many ways, and I love watching people that have mutual reception and digging into learning their whole story. And so I really appreciate you once again, everybody who tuned in and is watching this here today. And if you have mutual reception, once again, I remind you to reframe your chart. And I hope this was able to give you some empowerment and some more of a gift, really, of what I was able to be given when I learned about the power of mutual reception and how it was able to change my perspective on my own chart. So with that, once again, I thank you so much for being here today. And I will talk to you all soon. If you guys are interested in any of my content, feel free to follow me on Instagram or any of my socials, YouTube channel, thing of that nature. But once again, thank you so much. I love you. Have a blessed, amazing day. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.